Sheda Mena, Zungu, Zungu.
Dorje Drakpo Tsal Center Japan Barazinja Lo Zazo Gone Zoji Lama Dare Zazo Jimin Pinje Kandi Jandra Deje Eraga Bora Durji Kyala Surande Rana Rundu Nije Tabje Yin Peri Benjar Gonjan Zele Kata Kyanga Nage Zela Renze Nage Gombang Anjo Data Ina So Chuchi Nyingpo Tanya Gansala Yobe, Chudon Namba, La Tamasoke, Sanatorji, Yamni Sepakachi, Onzola, Tatorji, Chepo, the Chimok, some Tango, the Koran, we naturally Matoma, so Zuga Jo Mari, and it's all like Obata, Dele, Data named the Nagada Simji Tamji, Tingy de Olam, Bayanda was over Sanji Kumaramboji, Lango Barsa, Deji, the Dagitari, Tampichu Samu, Sanatorji Tipata, Bachimon, Sanatorji Kuchumbo, Pond Kodri, Surgeon the Scene, Nyam Salam, Simba Samji Mati, Nyam Sakan Tatabin, Delatin, Simji Tamji, Sanjay Chakumpala, Donogo, Kundasam Kumba, Jo Yambe, Sekayan Sambaka, Lo, Tembo, Lo Chimbo, Tandake, Jin, Dela Dene, Tuning, Kuju the Timbakon, Sintar, Tene Dela Kangi, Simba Savi Chuja Rambane, and Guru Rinpoche Topgyal Lingpa, and Guru Rinpoche uses on the Chokgyur Lingpa, the King Baka, Sabder, Nani, Lama Tratop Tsal, Chala, Lamrim, Nani, as Chokgyur. Then the don't say the one Gamtile, Hal, Lepa, so Depa Samji, Depa Kipa Samji, Salam to Tapa. Depa Ki say the day Zamayimba, Nyingpo repeating Loki Chichikon, Depa Kizam, Salap, Kajik Tinin to Yoba. That Tuluja, Guru Rinpoche, Tata, Twindala, Guru Rinpoche Trupa Janja Sono Kodi, Tertin Chokgyur Lingpa, then Rati Chinti Puda Yung Raki Terton Halepa, Pomo Mambo Son Yonri, then the So Tsama, Tang Guru Koran Ranke, Trupa Yin, Son Guru Haji Hiodri, you change the change, the Antemi Mayan, the Orjima Jito Yin Son. The Jito Zenai or Jingai Trupa, Tashi or the Riton Guru Trupa. Then it the so Halepa in Swajaka Lama de Mao, I choose a Kansa Sumuna, the Tamti Lejin, Gawagon, also let a Karatim Kansa in Badin, so Higori, so Zango in Badin, so he, also let a Karatim Kansa, Pomo in Badin, so he, so Zentu. Ngarang yung chima sindi jebori in samato ngarang one tun dara nani samato jite chuni chini sinya ni seji yobade mamang Guru Rinpoche kapsan mo Topgyal di kapsan dewa yudi ba ke dewa pakcha si ni samne ke lokhi yiji yobare sena sanap de jo kore de mina sanap de pe khatha ngo no ni wor kamare khatha ngo 당가서 대 이치유는 가서 대 레디오는 거를 보지 가서 원함 답결이 근저버데 등가서 적당 가서 레짐제는 가서 그 이치요로 왔다 남발이 얘네서 레짐제를 이치우고 레짐제를 이치하고 미니 나봐야고 당번이 차죠 말 렘제를 이치도 요고 되는 렘제를 이치요고 대 유찬의 성대 가서 하고 마마마를 가래 세유미도 다 하고리 마마마나 상이 강연 받은 거라서 하고 토크리다 Mama Mana gave out the Kare Sayuba, Nyani Kare Sayuba, Hakoto. Karesia Hakoto, Karesia, Mama Jessa, Lama Jeka Homa Yenaya, Lama Jeka, Chutin, Chipa, Chipa, Soma Chipa Sen. The Karesi Seko, the Lama Seva Chetan Yomari, Chula, Yazo Sangi Yomari, Chipa, and a Soma, the Monkey led a chat scene, Lamsam. Mandawar Charco, Mandawar, Sondruda, Della Tepatana, Gia, Nima region, the Yaje, Kanta, Gezo, Karakona, Yaje Leon Road, Marayori, Kansa, take the rest of Kansa, the Jeta, Mama Pachak, Java Subsmont, Vigiri. Garilla Katsi, Gatsi, Yanisina, Duru Rose or Zogana, Tashi Mashiwa, Data would be Chopon of Chandra, Jet Jongondo, Jet Totano. Lepa J. Jongdong. That Mama Pacha Yori Lama and Dreva Yori, children Dreva Yori. Gap they do, they are so young. Senan and Namdo Mambotan, Dadela Depa Jet Tata Matata, Dreva Chokia Yo Tata Matop Palani. They said Magiva parties on their Tata gave out Pacha Sitina. Pinzi gave out Panzona, Zozi, Pinzo, Yawa Mambo. Tendo Jiki Yosino for the day, so Virgin, then Yapor Sino now, then much of it.
Good morning, my Vajra brothers and sisters, and I address you in this way. Is it on now? That means it was on all night, because I just turned it before. Okay. All right. Oh, no, I've lost it. Anyway, good morning, my Vajra brothers and sisters. I address you this way because we are studying the Vajrayana here, and in the Vajrayana context, it's necessary to think of one another in this way. And this is not simply a perception that we are manufacturing or contriving. It is an acknowledgement of things as they are. Please generate bodhicitta by thinking that all beings throughout space must be brought to the achievement of the perfect state of the primordial Buddha Samantabhadra, and that it is in order to bring that about that you will listen to and to the best of your ability practice the profound and holy Dharma of the Vajrayana. When you are reminded to give rise to this bodhicitta, it is understood that you have already done so. And it is not simply repeating something you already know. When you are reminded to give rise to bodhicitta, the point is that you continue to stabilize and to deepen your bodhicitta. It is not enough simply to give rise to an intention once. It must be repeatedly reinforced. The Dharma with which we are concerned here is a terma of the great treasure revealer Chokgyur Lingpa, who was, as I told you, an emanation of Guru Rinpoche, or in fact, it would be better to say, was, as his peers acknowledged him to be, Guru Rinpoche in person. We are concerned with his terma, which is Guru Rinpoche's exposition of the stages of the path, called the essence of wisdom. We should appreciate the fact that Tendens, like Chokgyur Lingpa, of whom there were so many in Tibet, both male and female, are far greater than, far superior to other masters. They are unique, and we should appreciate, if we are going to receive and attempt to practice their teachings, we should appreciate how special they were and are. Among Guru Rinpoche's many predictions concerning his treasures, he said, in each large area, there will be a great treasure and a great treasure revealer. This is a reminder of me. But also in each small area, there will be a small treasure and a minor treasure revealer. This is not pointless. This is also a reminder of me. When Guru Rinpoche says that these treasure revealers were reminders of him, what he really means is that they were his reappearance in person, his emanations. With regard to our relationship to these teachings, as before, I will quote Yeshe Gyamtso, who said, all who in the future have devotion for Guru Rinpoche and his teachings will be those who have good karmic connections with him. Therefore, rejoice and understand that the blessings will be close to you. As she said, the blessings are indeed close to those with devotion for Guru Rinpoche and appreciation for his teachings who actually practice them. The blessings, however, will only be close if you believe in this. If through whatever cause you lose your faith, you lose your trust in Guru Rinpoche and the effectiveness of the teachings, you have placed or installed a barrier in between you and his blessings, and you will not receive them. It is trendy nowadays in your society to speak of the practice of Dharma without beliefs, but this is very misleading. There is no such thing as the practice of Dharma without certain beliefs. We live our lives based upon what we believe to be true, and without believing one thing or another, we could make no choices. And since we have to make choices, we have to work on beliefs. Well, what beliefs are needed? We must believe in karma. We must believe in the results of actions. And we must believe in interdependence. If we don't believe in karma, we believe that nothing matters and nothing we do matters, and that there's no point in doing anything. And if we don't believe in interdependence, then we lack the capacity to even begin to understand the most basic of the Buddha's teachings, let alone to attempt to practice them on any level. If we understand the way a little bit about karma and a little bit about interdependence, we will understand why different teachers of the same teacher or lama who receive the same teachings, possibly even on the same occasion, will have very different outcomes. For some individuals, having received instruction, they simply practice and immediately, day after day, start to improve and experience all the results and signs described in the traditional texts. When this happens, this is an indication that the person has a strong residue of a previous good karmic connection with that teacher and those teachings, and that there is no other karma in their continuum that is obstructing or interfering with the ripening of that good karma. But other times, we see something else happen. People can receive the same teachings, the same empowerments, the same blessings, the same transmissions from the same teacher at the same time. They can even attempt to practice, but day after day, they get worse. It's perhaps impolite to say they get worse, but that's what it amounts to, because their beings become more and more coarse, they become more and more opinionated, their kleshas proliferate more and more day after day. They become, in short, Lama said, harder and harder headed, more and more impervious, more and more jaded to the teachings. Now, while to have received the teachings in the first place, obviously that individual or those individuals must have some degree of good karmic connection, or as Yeshe Gyamtso indicated in her, in what I quoted, they would not have been in the room, so to speak. But nevertheless, there are, broadly speaking, two kinds of karma that are operative in our lives. These are called casting karma and completing karma. Casting karma is the karma that has determined your basic situation, such as, for example, the time, place, parentage, and circumstances of your birth and whatnot. Completing karma is what causes what happens to you afterward. That is why two people can be born in the same family with roughly the same DNA, and yet one of them succeeds in life and the other burns out and crashes. That's because of completing karma. So in the same way, with regard to Dharma, we can all have the same casting karma or similar casting karma that causes us to receive the same teachings from the same teacher at the same time and attempt to do the same practices, and yet one person soars in the skies of realization and another person crashes and burns. That's because of completing karma. So be mindful of this, please. Che sonza kanyambate ko Guru Rinpoche che son yartin maso ma hi odere de te sare yang nyam ko sa cha ba ya se de la sa de la tro ta ne ji ke se o mari chen de ni ni da sa ma dorje te ba ga lam nyam ne se ne ka se de jando sonza de lam che so sam je rawa de ma de wa re ro tu ne ya bo de ma so ta Sama Sanganyam Nisaya Gabo Yori Ya Tosa Royal Gabo. There is an education data graduation Yegerapa Rima so Nimari to Soso Shimjo in Jerem de Kati and that two Rimbo gone to two Yomari, Jerem Gonayanda, Zoram Gonayanda, Zokin Gonayanda, Geto Songyo and Ayanda.
Ramji Kale Lula Cherson, Haki Cherso, Senting is a Cherso, Kandayan Nandra is Santa Cherso, some Rawa and Mandeva Dingani, Tijandu, takes Kondakin, Madarajandu, Kondajin Yaki, the Yajan order. Tate Sanga Dorje Drakpo Tsal, Patro Kona Song, Dorje Samje, Cherso Samje, Rawa and Dana, KJ and Dasana, Tako. Tamsela Ganyam Dera Joba Lasoba Sisi, the song of the Takantarian, so that Tamarpala, so Kalekabori, the Tijando, Jinsit Timbo, Kangan, the so Yoba Hakot, the Yamadrajan, the Yargento, the Yamajilla songs are Songsi Tando, this song of it. Kaya song go the song the Meva, Gom the Meva, the Ponda, the Pond, the Chipo, not the Sanjay. They Marika that is a Kongtrol, Jinimari, Haleva Yabo, that they get Pinto Chimbo, Chenu Maris, songs at the Tamseko.
Yesterday, we touched on the topic of Vajrayana Samaya. We didn't actually go into what the Vajrayana Samayas are, other than the issue of Samaya contamination, contagion. And the reason for this is that the Samayas were extensively explained much earlier in the text, which those of you who've been following this series of teachings from the beginning will no doubt remember. And so if you feel that you need more information about it, or if you need to be reminded of the details of it, then you can study the teachings on it that were given at the beginning, years ago, at the beginning of this series, or you can find information about it in other texts, provided that you choose authoritative texts and not unauthoritative texts. I know that some of you dislike this topic. It makes you uncomfortable. You don't like rules, and you don't like talk of consequences. You don't like the fact that there are consequences to your actions, and that therefore there are consequences to not keeping rules. You especially don't like all this talk of hell, Vajra hell, and so on. You don't like it, and therefore you feel you shouldn't have to hear it. Well, it may help you to remember the context for all of this, and that all of the Vajrayana rules, so to speak, can be kept simply by maintaining the threefold bearing, seeing all appearances as the Guru and deity inseparable, all sound as the Guru's speech and the deity's mantra inseparable, and all thought as the natural display of the fundamental or wisdom mind. Nevertheless, even that does bring up something that some of you don't like, which is the need for constant self-examination. Many of you seem to feel that because you now receive what you regard as high teachings, Vajrayana teachings, Dzogchen teachings, and so on, that you should be awarded some kind of graduation certificate, as though you've graduated from all the rules and regulations, all the lower studies of Buddhism, and are now, you've all grown up, you've graduated, you don't need to hear any of this stuff about rules and regulations. The fact remains, however, that if you believe that, you're completely out to lunch. As long as we have thoughts, we require remedies for those thoughts. As long as we can be distracted, we require the conscious implementation of mindfulness and vigilance. Telling ourselves that we don't need those things is not going to help. It's only going to hurt us and eventually others. Especially while all samayas are kept through the threefold bearing, obviously maintaining the threefold bearing requires the mindfulness, which it embodies threefold, and also the vigilance of self-examination. As Kongtrul Rinpoche points out, we must constantly scrutinize ourselves and ask ourselves the question, to what extent am I experiencing all appearances as the deity, all sound as mantra, all thought as the display of wisdom? There is a big difference, one could say a world of difference, between having heard this and thinking therefore one has graduated from it, and actually doing it. For it to be of any use, hearing it is insufficient. You need to actually do it. Now, if you ask, will I never get beyond all these rules and regulations? If you practice, you may. There may come a day when such conscious observation, the conscious imposition of mindfulness, the conscious inculcation and maintenance of vigilance will no longer be necessary. When that day comes and you achieve perfect awakening, you will no longer need the rules and regulations. Until that day comes, you do.
Then the Kapsan de Tabulong Jat and the sort of Don Jolly and the sort of Don the Tabulong Jat, and the Kenamatam Yason Jake to take killer. Then the Tabak Chitin Tombolator, the so bundled the so on, Pan, young and Tukay. The Tandala, the Janda Radio, the Yoman Thomas and the so called Mapama, Singapore, or the Sanga Lami in Balas on the dinner hero, go into Chacha, Tomonga, the Trado Lasso, Yomotonga, go Yen Yishinga, Rangi, Gondosambo, Robert, Cheva, Jean, that is the drain song, the Ranga Yishinga, the drain song, the Yamba, Teta, Matone. Yamba Tatanga took no machine, Loto and the Power Super Son Hito, Ta Yalet the Pango, Tata Panza Tela, Yalet the Pamogo in Yomoton Hako Ateli, Jig Kakal home, Jig Mato Kakal Yomari, Tata Yoba Terrari Sanet drawn with the Yomoton Pamogo, Tata Yomotonga Daily, Tele Los Joba, Tata Yomotonga Pazanga song. Tata Yomotonga the Zansu Kajoro. Dika to Yoga Zambo the Tata Dodo Josoma. Kiba Yamati Mokin. Hakon, but Tata song as a Chaton and Longa, Kanjati in a Lentacole. Nara Tundu Yongjo do Okure, Tundu Nara Sia Yura is on the Tipova Channel, Langa and Antotona, and Halabashike. Be Yaborin, Deha, Dika to Conde Ronyam to Don. Conde Ronyam, Tanyava said, oh, my lady. Did it? Other child was a Yava de Yoma. Chana, we are not so send Medeva song, so Yoma. They were chance. These certain also going with Yava, the Tapar, Yoli, Jobio is a here called Marinas. Not on Trevor and the Trubs on the Mother Mantra, they have goes on the seas on the day. Didn't they drag away on the Naranga Kayan, but the Narang more hits at it. Tata Ngoma killed it, and Ngoma and Hakan the Trata corridor. Do you turn the Narankan the Zambo, the Tondo Collie? Tata Trata said the Yawa the Tracom and Narankan around the Trata, calling Naya. Lobo dinner, Yawa the Trata. Take Dika can't turn the Naran towards other. How did Tata Narang Nasa, they part water collie. They about the Hakoya, those on your son of Donna, that's Hanjak dishes. Not so. Tartok is Zogo Sanjang, also number Sanjay, Chichi the Solida. Mato Jagan Sanjok sent Gomiano, the Egorde, that's a Tombani Hene Gomiano, that's a Tomongari. Samma Yori, Chulo Manchi with the Yori. Tata di Tawa de Hakoya, the Tote Siate, Tomomai was number Sanjay or Mato, Chulo Kandagin Meva. These certain number Sanjay, Chichi Deshi. They are not kind, but Hako, the Tabakana, Trakoma, Trakoma, Sonsati, the Trakoma. They're Dorje, they're torn to the Sansa, the Sansa, the Sanjeta. Then Jet, Sansa, the Yomon, the Sansa, Jet, he then what? They you what about on the deal.
Another thing that may be helpful is to study the confession in the expanse of the view, which is a liturgy that we use in our yearly Dzogchen programs. Because in such confession liturgies, we go through the lists and categories of Samaya. And while this informs us of what the rules are that we are attempting to keep, it also explains their nature, their true nature. And what we are afraid of fundamentally when we hear the word rules or Samaya is restriction. But the essence of Samaya is committing yourself to the process of freeing yourself from restriction. So, Samaya is not, in fact, what we are afraid of. Samaya is, in fact, the solution to everything we are afraid of. Many of the Samayas correspond to the 5 Buddha families. And those Samayas, which include the 5 things not to be abandoned, the 5 things to be understood, the 5 things to be realized, the 5 things to be done. These Samayas fundamentally, in every case, point out the identity of samsara and nirvana. So, for example, one of the samayas, the samaya of what is not to be abandoned, is the samaya not to abandon the 5 poisons: attachment, aversion, and so on. The reason that we don't abandon them, and what not abandoning them means, is to recognize that they are, in their true nature, the 5 wisdoms. Not abandoning attachment and aversion does not mean we are required by rule to indulge in attachment and aversion. It means to recognize and understand that the true nature of attachment is discernment, and the true nature of aversion is mirror-like wisdom. Therefore, when these wisdoms are recognized or realized by an individual, there is no longer anything to abandon. So the samaya to be kept is basically kept through that understanding. Through understanding the true nature of samsara to be nirvana. Therefore, while it is phrased as a restriction, we must not abandon the 5 poisons. In fact, it is a method for freeing ourselves from restriction. In that way, the more we know about samaya, if we understand it correctly, the more confidence we will have. Confidence in its profundity and practicality, and confidence ultimately in our own nature, which is how and why it can be kept. Samaya is fundamentally not abandoning your own innate wisdom, your own true nature. With regard to the consequences of samaya violation, we talk about hell. Well, what is hell? Hell is not an external place. Hell is something that each of us might create for ourselves. Given that all impure appearances of samsara are hallucinations, hell is, of course, a hallucination. The more we split samsara and nirvana, the more we attempt to judge and see as negative the appearances, the kleshas, and so forth, the colors and shapes of samsara, the closer we come to a hell of our own creation. When someone recognizes the non-duality of samsara and nirvana, there can be no such thing as hell for that person, because they are not creating it, and hell must be created. In fact, we could say that this view of non-duality, the non-duality of samsara and nirvana, is finally the most unarguably unique feature of the Buddha's teachings. In general, we say that such things as emptiness and the impartiality or universality of bodhicitta are unique features of the Buddha's teachings. But if we're fair, Lama said, these are not too dissimilar to what we find in other religious traditions, if we give them a fair assessment. But the non-duality of samsara and nirvana, that is a unique feature. That highest truth, which we find in the Vajrayana teachings, and especially in Dzogchen, that is unique. Honest.
Teni ta tendri, teni ta tesare, tela sacha hyuna teni katang nga soke yinda ni che chazoko damya ke kun sa ko ke jamambo hiri. So tamse chanya de songchap se ya za chembori ma to ma gire la chon ta ni ko ma ri la kin ma gin ge che na la tam de ko ni ri damya gin ri se ko de sa tam se de ngara ka re da ma da sam ta to na ke chi ge je de ri de ngara ka ngara songchap ge de ke chi ge je de ri ngara za ma so da yin za ma cha no kare ke tang yin ne tam chen gu ya de shuk chen mo yo ri ngara ra da cha yo nga la ma chen bo ma ri lama ka ma ri Chonggyur Lingpa Marari Mara Yongti Naji Yupa Mamari. Then the Jando Naratan Dodo Kapsala Mother Java Chung Seki. Garis in the Tera Joanna, Moni Chutoguna, Lamsan Jawa Jan, Lamsan, Kora Keran Ketan Yavani, the Lamsan Sambo Yomado, Java Kimbo Somi. Java Muzo Jinga and Zudukunga, Porbangaga, Koranga Janga, Tong Zudu. The Jimsi Garis in the Matsamola. Ngala chazo godero jani samor ngala zawani ni chama ma zewa hal le ba ge zewa chimbo yu ngala ni ren sa yin zewa chimbo yu chama mo ga sa zai me de nga zabzab gare zo se na gare se ne nie che na me ge zama song ya ro ri dang be bu ge dang be nie che na me koran chi nie wo ri de zama nie wo ri de na me ge tong ko de na ge ge dang be de me ge Jung Jang Tong was a young did not yet Tong. Jung Yongzo the Tong. Then another Jung Tongboy. Mug Jung Tosala, Nazota, one can draw among what it's like Matsama. Then Nazota, the earring of Matsama, one can draw Chimboris. One now one cutting one chung Ginando, Mariko Son Tondo, Mari, one Jajamambo Kurtsa. They can draw Chimbo, Tangaso, beats other, Sang and draw. Then the Takantarian Yonti, Thomas, Ongori, Yonti, Kitran, Tonkin, and the Yaporisa, then Naran Pomboro, Yomba, and Kepari. Then the mother Drawati Kokchong, your mother, so tiny when you overlaps on the Dela, Pang, Pujano, Toku, they carries in a Magamari, Zewa Chimbo, Sama. They did Mug Yonti, Tata Mam, check you the Mug Pata, Yonti, Yonja, Mother, my Yonti say. Patron Tonkin Yondo, Rangi Rude, Magajon de Lams Tonkari, Yonti, Renny Yuna, Halevan Tonkomari. They carries in Yonti Tomata, Jumbo, the Garesina, ko na chari le ko mal yong ti da de rai na chari ro ko den thong thong jeni ni nyam ro du ju se ya de lama chok chim ro nyam de song na nyam ro du ju song na den ni ro de cha de jing nam de cha de shada lama de la de ba da na chok chim ro je to ko ma re do ni ne cha ba re je yong chi ko ma re de to de ne yong ma do yong de to ko ma de Dujando me ba so nyam ni zang sang ni zo ta yong nga de chu de chi nga le de cha re so de ja de ni du de la ma so an de pi chi bo to tu sa ma ta ne du ko de ni cha ran so na dujando ma dan jawa su na chen jik ti ka kam san jawa de chung chung zo chu ro ba ni dam bi chu kan jawa de chu che re zo jin de ti pa cha de kwang ki de cha an lam sang ji do ji de se ne pin to chen bo
The Samaya issue with which we began yesterday morning was talk of contamination. And given that it was presented as the foremost issue in that context, it may mislead us into thinking that Samaya is not fundamentally something that we have to keep within ourselves, but a matter of avoiding others, or at least certain others. But this is not actually true. As with most other aspects of Dharma, we have to put it in its proper context. The most important aspect of Samaya is that we take individual responsibility for our own minds and our own actions. And what we do, our observance, for example, of threefold bearing and so on, is really an individual matter. It is more, Samaya is much more concerned with that than it is with whom we interact with. Nevertheless, we must also admit that as ordinary people, we are very easily influenced by others. And the issue of Samaya contamination is fundamentally, when we get down to it, the issue of choosing our influences. When we are around those who have no faith in our teachers, eventually it's going to cause us to lose faith. When we are around those who have great faith in our teachers, it will cause us to increase in our faith. Now, speaking for myself, Lama Tratop said, I'm quite careful about this. And it's a good time to mention it because some of you don't understand why I am this way, and you take it amiss because it doesn't meet your personal expectations, cultural or individual. First of all, I am not, in my opinion, a great monk. When I assess myself, I think I'm a pretty much run-of-the-mill, pretty ordinary person. That means that I feel that I have faults. Now we have a saying in Tibetan, if you get too close to someone and stare at their face, all you're going to see is their eyebrows. Which means that when we get too close to one another, we will start to observe one another's faults. Now, I have to be careful about this because I need to protect you who receive empowerments from me. The job of giving empowerments does not end the day you give the empowerment. If disciples incur a responsibility, and when you receive an empowerment from a teacher, whether you like it or not, you are thereafter not their student, you are their disciple. If disciples have the responsibility of maintaining samaya with a teacher, the greater responsibility is that of the teacher or Lama who gives the empowerment. They have the responsibility of making it easy for the disciples to keep samaya, of not testing them by putting them in a position where they are going to unnecessarily bump into their Lama's faults. This is especially true in my case because the empowerments that I have been presenting are not jnans, they're not permission blessings such as are commonly given, especially to Westerners, and then given the name empowerment. They're actual empowerments, full empowerments. And therefore the samaya is actual, full samaya. I therefore have a responsibility for your protection to keep my distance from you socially. So that when you look at me, you not only, so to speak, see my unruly eyebrows. That's a terrible analogy for you to use with me as your translator because my eyebrows are really all over the place, but I like it. Now, I'm aware that this doesn't fit with the personal agendas of some of you, and that's just the way it is. If I let you get too close, you're only going to see my faults, and that's bad for you because it will reduce your faith in the teacher and therefore automatically, even though you may claim it doesn't, in the teachings. It is human nature that the closer we get to one another and the more time we spend around one another, the more we tend to find fault with one another. For various reasons, it is much easier for us to see faults in others than virtues. Especially, one of the most disastrous things that can happen to Vajrayana students or disciples is to treat their guru, and when you receive full empowerment from someone, they are your guru, is to treat their guru as an equal. Now this is tricky in this culture because you are obsessed with equality. Nevertheless, when you treat your guru as an equal, as is going to happen when you hang out together socially, when the relationship becomes too informal, even though you begin that process of hanging out informally with the devotion founded on appreciation and gratitude, that devotion will very quickly be warped into personal attachment because it becomes a social interaction. And so therefore, it is my responsibility as your teacher to keep such informal interactions to an absolute minute.
Oh, that's a theory. Then it Japan logic tong that Zapator Mochina Baconio, Zapator Moche comes out of Michalon and Ori, logic tong Japan Katsi and Natavanya to China, that's a Tamdako Kudisare, he, the Carissa in a Jubula, Trotoplan Reba, to Chimbo Song. Kong Ma Zara the Neko and Rodica, Zara the King John Kano, ne. 早日，等等错，形状看到个错，空等你那个的判不告诉了，形状看到个空的粗大些呢，冲出点呢，形状看到个冲出点呢，你么的、起么的，就能哪个的啥的干嘛的，给查出来一下子就人呢，错他们马上查个讲错的就讲，但就特别人把空的头头有嘛的，铁层层有嘛的，俺这怎么？零人，就特别人把。
Drupa.
Ling Reba, Lama, Ling Reba, Ling Reba. So then Kong Yam Halam Zogena Kong Topa Zamia, Redo Zamia, Yomaricona, Manata Jamson, Gajatin, then in Chongson, Chala, Shajiya, Pawana Shajiya, the Rizina. Tendriki to chamber song. Yiso Congo Loma de Tare Tamse the John Tamyanda, Tamse the Desert Madin Reina, Loma de Conden on the deep and repudin. Dropped up Lingreba, the church of Chamber de Katamiki, Goba, so Nazo de la Goba, Tezo Cadillacum, Katamiki, Katajame, the Cotilla, Song Tajame chance.
Yeah.
Song time. Oh, song time you chance. They did them. Then also Dada Lama Sanghaba Lama Mambo the chant and all. That they time every day. There's a lot of Nika Chazogolero Desare Nam is also Sangi Machepa, Samaje, Monetaneke, the solar drama was a Marie Cordo, Desare, Pizzas of the Goro, danger. That deal loju the tam ju de tung tung da de ling reba chop top tenru yung jo da nga so the yung se ba de na la ma ma ni nyam ni chi di se na de la da tam se ku jo ko de song de then the so the de so the go de ni ta na kan sam de ne jo kin.
So to conclude this interlude in the teachings, I'll tell you a very brief story that is in the words of my perfect teacher, Guru Rinpoche. And as I know that all of you have studied this and continue to review it regularly, I'm sure you know the story and it's unnecessary for me to mention it. But just in case there were any of you who weren't assiduously reviewing this text as is recommended on a regular basis, I'll tell you the story. There was one of the most renowned siddhas among the many branches of our Chokgyur tradition was the Siddha Lingrepa. And to give you an idea of how great a siddha he was, he once went on a solitary pilgrimage to the sacred site of Tsaritra in the south on the border of Assam. And Tsaritra is the abode of realm protector Dakinis. And realm protector Dakinis, when siddhas approach, will often test them through producing apparitions to assess their level. And so when he got to Tsaritra, the realm protector Dakinis caused in his perception day to turn into night, so that instead of the sun in the sky, he saw just the stars. There is a sacred lake in Tsaritra, and they caused that lake, which is, as most lakes are, filled with water, to appear to him as filled with human blood. Lingpa was such a siddha, so beyond hope and fear, that he calmly responded by jumping into the lake, happily swimming in the lake of apparent blood. And just to seal the deal, as it were, he left his footprint, several footprints in stone on the shores of the lake. So that's to tell you who he was, what level he had reached. He could overcome the most fearsome apparitions and could leave his footprints, which are still there, in stone. But later on in his life, one of his disciples broke Samaya. One. And that caused him to lose the ability to speak. And for the rest of his life, from the time or day on which that disciple broke Samaya until he died, that great siddha, Lingpa, was mute, speechless, could no longer speak. Now this is one specific example, but there are many others I could give you. This is a real thing. This has happened to many lamas throughout Tibetan history. Just for your information. And now I'll return to the text.
Oh, yeah, that did it. Any job subject about Bondoni, so that Bondoya, the vacation body, that Bondongoya, Bondona, the Tonsin number some, Lording about the Jeopardy about the take up, Bondoa, the number some keeper, Dambo, the Lording about the Hikota, who get the Sasaki of Yarana, then the Bondon Sana someone, some person, that they get second by Jagatin. Second Jagatin use. Bena, Yang Lodo, and Sewason Sava Trumnes, Angaso. Sewason Sava Trumne, Big Lodo, Bacon, Trumne, Jungji, the Ranhaji Choa, so Yaki Yong Tato Sombatar, Lamji Cake Sour, Chopa Dene, Yongdin the Jimper, Bondon Guchen, Dela, Dayongdin Yaki Yomaki, the Bondon, these are the Hickens, Guchen, Dela, Sana, Simja, and Bartimba, and Data Rose. So
to return to our text, yesterday we finished the fourth of the 5 sections of the path, which was the removal of impediments. And now we begin the 5th and final section of the text, the final aspect of the path, which is enhancement. And enhancement here is presented, as you might expect if you've been receiving these teachings, in the 3 headings of a brief statement, a detailed explanation, and a concluding summary. First, the brief statement in Guru Rinpoche's words. Then, outer, inner, and secret enhancement. That's the root text. And then the commentary. If you remember, and no doubt you do, because you review the material you've received in teachings, you don't simply let them lie and collect dust, nor do you simply throw them in the garbage if you have those. If you remember, the fundamental or overarching image being used here for the spiritual path is agriculture. The path, the preparatory path of the sutras was compared to plowing or preparing the soil, the field. The second aspect of the path, receiving empowerment, beginning with the path of Tantra, was compared to or represented by the planting of seeds in that good soil, properly prepared. The main body of the path, the practices corresponding to the 4 empowerments, consisted of nurturing the growth of those seeds into sprouts. and seedlings. And then the fourth aspect of the path, what we just completed, the removal of impediments, was compared to protecting the plants that are growing from hail, blight, frost, drought, and so on. So now we come to the fifth and final aspect of the path, which is enhancing the growth of those plants. For example, just as when you are growing crops in a field, having assured that they are protected from all that will harm them, it is necessary to continue to engage in means to ensure their continued growth to the point of their full flowering and fruition through the fostering methods of agriculture, the use of spells, and so on. Similarly, here, once you have assured that you are removing obstructors or obstructions or impediments on the path, it is then necessary to begin to enhance the practice of the path in order that your development continue. And there are three aspects to this enhancement: outer, inner, and secret. They are as follows.
Oh, that's a good thing. Daddy, Dani ba jebar heba de la sabin number some seta nang se pondo da nang pondo da sam pondo ponji ba da sabin number some de banane tambo de la yang se pondo de la yang dorte ba de jebar heba ni ga ko ni ya sio sari de tambo dorte ba de ma hi som go sari then the tambo dorte ba de ta zab sai na ne sar yer ji ja yang lam chir chi ba sa chok ro su yor so ta nam je ba cho ro ran de dan de so ko de ngo de ta ma ja ji sar da kan da ya de sar da cha da tamo ji ba yer zang ni ba ma ja da si ta nga so cha da mo sum so je de yor zang ni Padmasambhava da tin jong ko zang se ya de nye rang Padmasambhava tin song ko de zang go rai ta ni ba rai ta zang ni ka ya me Padma this some da tin nga song jong ko da de de cha che da tamo sum ka de yong sa de ya da wo de ta nga so de chen ngon thu so na za de le la za za wi to kare le la won do pa de ta gom che ta de se ka le o ri ma to le la bo zang ni Padma cha ta wo che cha ya lang do tang nyom che to pe lang do tang nyom je zang wa tam je chol lin ya da ngi ba tam je pha to ya da tang nyom long ma tin de lu song do ma yin ba di wang de chor ma song wa ta di tha ki se go di tha ki se de ta chen chi tin bo go chen ba ka chen ba de chi yin ni de jan de chen ba de tin bo ke che ba de wang de ma chor wa rap ke che ka ke che je na ta nga so ke ta pha chang ka ma chin de pha nga so ke chi jo na meng chi zum de che ke che che zo ta da ke che zo de zam na ko che be sen so ha ko so na ra bi de ma na ke che ni ba de ma na tha ma ke che sim ba phin chi len de ma so ba ga nya de ra cha so di phin ju len de ma so wa ke de ba ke sen tha de ta gong ko de do gong ma da wa lam de cher chi ba lam cher se ya de ta nga so jo do ro de lam cher ta nga so sa nga nam jo ba khang ba na do nyam ni se ko ma de ro ko de do ko de ka sa ka na ro Chabane se ko de nekor se ko de prongchen nan ro de de kasa ka nan ro ne lamcher je chir ki pe ni da na chodo ko yor da na wa thum ji se zo da ro rigza chodo ko na wa sang ni to pa kang cha dan des anye kum za nam mari kya ko chodo na ro ga zo ka de ko la ke le ka so la de ngo tu ma che gu de nyo mo tong ga da chodo da de ko de yin ko de na chodo ko yor na kang cha ya Namatamji, Mega Yorda, Zong Zibata, Kare Nana, Te, Nami of the Janiba, the Naya of the Ro, Chambata, Kiel Ro, Zangi Topa Kang, Kielna, Ronya Toba, Kipaiba, Kik the Ronya Toba, Kaka the Kerma Sama, Zambo the Rent Kalata Toy Sam, Chapa Jen, Salama Sama, the Rent Toa the Kayam Dozon, Pat Orma Yab. Zangi Redo, Nizanga Topate, Nimi Hichimbo on the Chapabadella, that Toto Randragan your say at Thomas did. That the Ruche Redona, then the Toto Randran your day, Sonayaki, Denayaki, Sunayaki, Tonayaki, Nyanayaki, Lanayaki, Chite, Chideba, Kiseade, Toto Ransator, your padelas, Laco, Chaka Toto Randro, the Hong the Post. Dinagi, Toto Yorda Nama Tamji, Sancho Double Draws in your Topolista, Sancho Double Draws on your Topol, Chatanga Sancho, Double Draws in your Topol, but taking us all the dust. Mazo Tamarpada Zangi the Topa take a dust in the Noah. There's a Medeos of the dust in the Medeos, Gitelating also Tunaya, send the Medeo, Majiba radio. Some they will keep go, you don't call it, Kitchen, Deo, some of your money. Kitchen, you're the Harkona, your money. Manchego the Tatangas interviews to Hamato, the Dewariki, Yomari. They didn't tell it in the social that there's a Cholapinto, Palapinto, Carisicum, Cholapinto, Chimbojondo, La Parte Yargayos, Yarka, the Dala, Tunaya, Dewaki Yomari, Kablete, Don Harkona, Yon, Sir Megatan, Devanaki, Yorite, Nan Sentel, Kableo, Denagi. Tata Zangi Topa Yonzo, the Torok Nawa Yonzo, the Sancho Chokgyur then Namja Kipu Pomotam Kiporio. These certain Nazogandi, Pondoda, Pujon and Raw, Dog, you Lama Yakanga, that Sancho Chokgyur and Zangi Topatami, then Toto Rando say at it. Then you go Zoking and Namjaba say at it, the Pomo say at it, and Namjo Pomo say at it, Tadika, so that any mango chocolate. They might got them as okay. Yummy, young to see the thing. Yes.
So the second part of this is the detailed explanation of what these outer, inner, and secret means of enhancement are. The first of these, outer enhancement, also has a brief statement and an extensive explanation. And the brief statement in Guru Rinpoche's words is as follows. External objects and conditions or circumstances, no matter how they appear, are transformed into help on the path to awakening through the knowledge of how to bring them on the path. The point here, Lama Tratop said, and his comments came before and between and after. I'll try to get them where they go, or if I forget them, then I'll add them at the end. The point here is that on the path, as Vajrayana practitioners, we continue to interact with the world. We don't usually stay in one place. We move around, we travel, we go on pilgrimage, we interact with other people, we go to different places, and so on. And even if we don't, even if we stay in one place, we are still interacting with the objects of our senses. This naturally brings up the issue of our response responses to objects of the senses. Our habit is to respond to any sense object and any condition or circumstance that we find pleasant or gratifying with attachment. So we respond habitually to anything that we think of as good or desirable with attachment, which means that we not only accept it, but we want more of it. In the first moment, we accept it, and in the second moment, we start to think about how we can hold on to it and get more of it. Similarly, we respond to any sense object or circumstance that we find in any way unpleasant or threatening, displeasing in any way, with aversion, which means that in the first moment, we try to get rid of it. We try to push it out of the way, block it. And in the second moment, and thereafter, we try to, and we think about ways we can prevent having to deal with it ever again. And then the many things that we experience as personally irrelevant, that is to say, things, sense objects that we neither like nor dislike, that we find neither gratifying nor threatening, and circumstances that don't seem to promise immediate gratification or immediate threat. We ignore them, which is to say that we respond to them with the poison of apathy. We may dress it up by calling it neutrality or equanimity, but that's a lie. It's apathy. We are apathetic toward everything that is not an immediate source of gratification or an immediate source of threat or unpleasant sensation. So we are, as practitioners, faced with this situation. We are going to continue to have to interact with sense objects and circumstances that we are going to feel are good, bad, or indifferent. But to continue to progress on the path, we have to change how we react to them, how we respond to them. We cannot allow ourselves, as Jamgon Lodro Thaye says, and Lama reiterated, we cannot allow ourselves to fall under the power of our stupid habits, our stupid, unthinking habits of acceptance, rejection, and apathy, as stated before. When we like something, eventually, we first accept it, and then we try to hold on to it and get more of it. That's called acceptance. When we don't like something, someone, some circumstance, we reject it. We try to get rid of it, block it, not see it, not deal with it. And then we try to figure out how we can avoid it or exterminate it. That's projection. And when something or someone neither gratifies nor threatens us, we try to ignore them. We try to have no opinion. We remain apathetic. In short, if it doesn't produce gratification or threat in our immediate experience, we don't care. And not caring is not neutrality. It is a poisonous state of apathy. So we have to start with accepting the fact that that is how we operate, and that we have to change that. If we want to progress on the path, if we don't want to progress on the path, that's fine. But if we want to progress on the path, we want to enhance our practice, which means we want these plants we're growing not to be wiped out. We're going to have to do something about this. At best, we need to recognize our responses, our reactions in the first moment. And the first moment means, and Lama demonstrated this, the time of a finger snap. As soon as the thought of attachment, aversion, or apathy, as soon as the thought of acceptance, rejection, or I don't care arises, we need to cut through it. If we can't do that, then intermediately we need to recognize and cut through that thought in the second moment. And at the very least, we must cut through it in the third moment. If we can do this, then everything that appears to our six consciousnesses, everything that is part of the six groups will become helpful to us on the pursuit of awakening. What are the six consciousnesses? They are the eye consciousness, which sees forms, the nose consciousness, which smells smells, the ear consciousness, which hears sounds, the tongue consciousness, which tastes, and the body consciousness, which experiences tactile sensations, both those involving objects outside the body and those within the body. Those five sense consciousnesses. And the mental consciousness, which experiences dharmas, which are fundamentally thoughts and images produced by the five sense consciousnesses. So those are the six groups, the six consciousnesses, along with their faculties, the physical organs that maintain those consciousnesses or allow them to function, and their objects. Self-liberation of these six groups, and Lama used this term repeatedly and intentionally because it's the name of Chokgyur Lingpa Kongtrol, whose Dzogchen teachings we will be beginning in October. Self-liberation of these six groups is achieved by cutting through all habitual tendencies to react in the three ways that we're used to reacting. Such as when we think, Lama said, oh, I liked lunch today, it tasted good. Oh, I didn't like lunch today, it tasted bad. or I like this, or I don't like that, or I don't care about this, or this doesn't matter to me, and so on. All of these thoughts are the accumulation of negative karma, the perpetuation of delusion, and to the extent that they are operative, the prevention of progress on the path. Those of you who attend the Dzogchen program this coming fall will see that much of Chokgyur Lingpa's presentation consists of learning, teaching us how to identify and cut through these types of thoughts. In other words, how to allow the self-liberation of the 6 groups. And really, Lama said, we can say that a Dzogchen practitioner, a Dzogchen yogi or yogini, could be defined as someone who can do that. As long as we continue to relate to the world with attachment, aversion, and apathy, as long as we continue to accept, reject, and not care, we are not, whatever we may call ourselves, Dzogchen practitioners.
Jala zoba gongchen nyingge ji nila demi gongchen shenpa ji parma kwana zambu lemdra yaas tate nyamgong ke pendrwa chetang gong ke lundrwa yaate ha leba sarbo songya doa de tere ji songwa de yurji deda lam de jadar chana sindampe lo jongwa dan se so so ke sen damba ke damba zela rabda ne songren damba jya de pe damba de pe ke chi bor sangye jin damba lo jongwa ta kun zip chi cha tam ji tem zhe da dong da dong ni ji chol la ti ne lam jang go song de jer mal le jer tang jiang wi cha ne ma zo hi na mal le chang khong ji che wa tang mal le ji chang khong ma ji lin cha bu lo ma su zo nga zo mang bo che ta da lem de ka kon hi ko ra le ji che wa ta zhi long jar khor ji lo zhou so ma da me me ji ne ba zha che zha gang la yang khong zeng ma za wa zupa gong ke deda tserap dam pama yen jang choro bang ke dada ngo ma ki be lengi sa pa la yang ning ji jin bo ji so de zeli lo jar se ya de nga so mang bo de nga so de lo ma je la pa chora ke ya bo se ja yu de ke chora na ha le ba ke ka upset nda wo Topgyal yum yesu ngazo Kongtrol del chwa mi langko del chepa yo mari songo deli lonjar lodro deli lo jar da che ro de jong do konzeng muza cherap thomi pama yin bo wang ge de kona zo ngo ma ki de zupa gom ya ta kora ngo ma ki kora gan gare yin ba de ngo ma kora chro ba de chor song sam ni ge de la ning ge de zupa ha le ba gom na de ge pin kare de se Kongtrol ge pin mari ni nyemzhe da zato norze so yi dong wa da zu zha de yi dong ma da yi dong ma nga zu ni nyemzhe da ha le ba ga ro ma thomi zha yi ba ma thomi zha yi sai na da mang ke ge de ni ge ha le ba ju su de ge wan de ho de da zo chu ba mang go ni ge de ge wan de ho de de je su de ge wan de ho de da de la zab zab go ya pe ke chen bo de ni na ze wa de ba ma ni na ze wa yo de Rani Nikal Sewa Yatas, Nina Sewa Haleba Sabo Gori, Sewa Chapa Mazi Zorda, Hincha Mazi, Hincha Soda Dongan Sawado, Ni Niemja and Zato, Norze, so Yito, Tamki, Yoma, the Mulam Tawa, Demi Daba Trado Gomke, Yenjit Zabaki, the best of Song Yadri, Madame the Jumanaki. Chora Tare Toya in the Sunday Drum your dear Kanki. Did you want to read of the Mambo? Chara's Mambo Tongo, near Mambo Tongo. Tare Jaya, Taka son, Yamakaki, the Dawats, Honga Jaya son, near the chief, the Jarmo with it. Yamaki the Chora draw the child. One that drug a bundle mixing night child. The going legend of Dodano. The Chama, Juma, Malam Dangon Sinama, the Chorang and Yalam Tandin, Jama, Bonyalanda, Toma, Bonyalanda, Tana Kayam do. Dato Nika, the Choran Dagon Trovari Mother Koki Kayam. Chora Padio Katsi Rana Koki Oma. The Katsi Chora Doharniona, Koki Oma. Then I get Malamda, Jumada, Demi and Daba Trata Gomnes, Dema. Some debut Maris. Some debut of the Yomaris. Tangonetrane, the sort someone you think come to Jani Padmasambhava, the Dinze, Hientin Zapati, Hientin, Senanity Twat, Twat, Hienzanga Twat, Hinchaga. Zewa can twat you to home, the Zewa go home, Hinchaga twat you to home. There in Zambati, Chada Nika material, your Chada Nika Medita notation or the Chada Nika material, your song, not so, your song. Tata Lord John to your son, Tolson, get us some zone, and Lord John Coro, Tata Lord John Dominant. Then I get your test on the thing, also get Chadam of some Jehora, they are jungle. Chada Nika material, you're now Parma, Tang Yonsum Majawa. Oh, God, I don't care for Tang Yonsum Majawa. They don't care so. Carezo, Tang Yonsum Majane, Majawa, Melanto, Kojoga, Dean from the Yo. Choran then a pets, Malan, Tea, Koran Sola, Tea, you dinner, Choran de Yapori Lagomari. Sanjay got in the room called the Domba Tiana, they Tundori. They could make the tomorrow time, Sanjay is not in Yone, give us some other called Pachaya. They could think of Tundoro say, Lam got out. And Yoba now Sanjay gets in her. It's not some Babasa and now Sanjay Singa Darko, two gentlemen so high in the Jana Yakan holiday, Sanjay Singa, Mambo, Golden Row, Batana, and Row, Zonha, Samo, Dopana, Nala, Soturke, Dopata, Tanzenda, the Sedino, the Dopa, the Donna, Yonke, Soturke, Dopa, Kiel, Yungdurke, Tanze, Tamze Luke Sakor Yil Demu so gets up Nari Pakatan Gavan Nari Tagotana Otogaya Yomani Ali Ramangatoni Gavan Nari Yota Pakan Yota Yoga Chokgyur Torate Janini Tora Chimbo Timando Janini Tora the Madam Yamanagi Sam Don the Parma Tor the Ela de Sarahon Java Yo the Disicos Yope so Pakato Yopan so Yope, so Zambu legend of Jetat, so the Zambu legend of Jetat, so Yana, then Pinto, Tamaso gave us to do and draw that is on. And they are.
The second section here in describing how to bring outer enhancement is a detailed explanation. And this is also divided into general needs and particular needs. So first are the general needs. Guru Rinpoche's text, cultivate patience for enemies and give rise to compassion for them. Meditate on the unreality of friends and cut through your craving. For all who are neutral to you, establish a good karmic connection. Here, as is obvious in the root text, the focus is on our interaction with other beings. Although we find inanimate objects attractive, irritating, or irrelevant, somehow our worst reactivity appears to be reserved in general for our interactions with other beings, human and non-human alike. If you ask, Jamgon Lodro Thaye writes, how do you bring these conditions and circumstances, these objects of interaction, to the path? There are basically 3 ways that we have to do this. The first is by training our minds in intention. The Lama said, this is one of the implications of the oft-quoted saying, everything rests on the tip of intentions. It's really our intentions that determine to what extent we are going to give into the habit of reactivity. If we can train our minds with strong intention not to be reactive, it will, through repeated mind training, through repeatedly training. Mind training, we say mind training in English. Once something's translated wrong, if I may say so, we're stuck with it forever, especially if somebody with an R after their name signed their name to it. But basically, it's attitude training. Lojong doesn't mean, Semjong is mind training. And Semjong can include Lojong, but they're different. Lojong means attitude training. It's training our attitude. We can approach mind training once we have trained our attitude, but we have to start by training our attitude because that's the part that is most valuable, isn't it? So attitude training is really about cultivating the intention and motivation. I don't want to be reactive. I don't like it. So we actually use a little bit of aversion. I am not going to get angry at people for whom I feel aversion. And if you repeat that often enough, at first you will still get angry, but not as angry. Or you'll catch yourself, as it says in the second and third moment. But if you keep on doing it, eventually you won't get angry at them. And it works the same way. So Jamgon Lodro Thaye says, and Lama commented, the first step, first thing here is to, we have to use habituation. We're counteracting habit, right? So the only way we can counteract habit is by creating a stronger habit as a counteragent. There's no other way to do this, relatively speaking. And then, in addition, we use 2 other. Once that is established, nothing will happen without that. But once that is established, we use 2 more techniques, which is working with interdependence, relative truth, and working with emptiness, absolute truth. And we'll go through all of those bit by bit. But basically, the general point is this. What are the things, who are the persons or other beings to whom we are the most reactive? Jamgon Lodro Thaye here starts with the worst, most extreme cases. Because they're cause the biggest problems and because they're also the easiest to spot because the emotions are so intense. When people harm us intentionally, we are less reactive when someone harms us accidentally. But when someone harms us intentionally because they have a grudge against us, that's one of two things that really, to which we respond with strong anger. Well, first of all, we have to remember that if they have a grudge, I mean, here it talks about shakun, which means a flesh grudge, which means a being we killed in a previous life. And there are countless such beings. Right? But if they have a grudge against us, this is a result of previous karma. Karma is action, right? As you all know, because you study the principle of karma assiduously. So, in other words, we did something. If we didn't do it in this life, we did it in a previous life. Things do not happen without causes, according to the Buddha. If you don't believe in the Buddha, then that's fine, but then why are you here? Sorry. According to the Buddha, things have causes. So if someone is intentionally harmful to you, if someone acts with spite, then there must be karmic precedent. Even worse than that, even harder for us not to get angry at, is betrayal. And betrayal is when we are nice to someone, helpful to someone, maybe even save their life, and for reasons of their own, they turn on us. They do something to harm us. So these are the two types of beings. Let's talk about humans, because many of you don't believe in non-human beings other than animals, so believe them on it for now. But these are the two types of people that we think of as enemies. And the people who intentionally harm us or seek to harm us, and even worse, the people who betray us. The first step is not to nurse a grudge, holding on to a grudge, not to do that. And nursing a grudge, holding on, is an action. It's not an absence of action. We need to remember this. It's a choice. It's an easy choice for us to make, but it's a choice. I can't hold on to this cup without holding on to it, right? If I let go, the cup drops, yeah? Well, it's the same thing with holding on to a grudge. You have a choice. You can either do it, hold on to it, or not. So Jamgon Lodro Thaye says, the first thing is, don't hold on to a grudge. Instead, cultivate patience. Now, how do we cultivate patience? Through perspective. Look at the whole situation. Look at that being and their interaction with you. Don't just look at a soundbite's worth of interaction. Look at the whole thing. in many cases, you will find that you did some stuff. Not in every case. In some cases, it goes back to previous lives. But in many cases, where we get pretty pissed off, if we look carefully, we'll see that we did some stuff. And then you need to go further. You need to look at the whole perspective. What do we know? We know that samsara is beginningless. We know that if we believe in the Buddha's teachings, because the Buddha said that. If we don't believe in the Buddha's teachings, then what? But if we believe in the Buddha's teachings, we know that samsara is beginningless. We also know that in every lifetime we've had parents. We therefore know that if we do the math, that this being who has upset us has countless times been our father, countless times been our mother. We have countless times been their father, their mother. And sure, that being has been everything to you. Countless times. Why do you not recognize that? Why, when you meet the person, do you not think, hey dad, hey mom? Because we are deluded. Our delusion gives us the inability to remember the past. We accept it as normal because everybody else we know is deluded too. But it's not normal, it's delusion. The fact that when we meet someone for the first time in this life, we don't recognize them as our previous father or mother, that's not okay. That's delusion, that's ignorance. That's on us. So first of all, we didn't recognize them as who they really are. Because they've been our parents far more times than they've upset us. And then the next step is to think about it from their point of view. From our point of view, they're our parent. What about their point of view? If they are intentionally harming us, they're doing it because they are unhappy. No one happy has ever harmed anyone else intentionally. Because you cannot be in a state of spite and be happy. So therefore, Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Thaye says, and Lama reiterated, if they're harming you, that means they're suffering. Furthermore, if you believe in the Buddha's teachings, then you believe that by harming you, they are accumulating negative karma. You are not accumulating negative karma unless you nurse a grudge. If you nurse a grudge, then yes, you are. But their harming you does not cause you to accumulate negative karma. It is not a cause of future suffering, it is suffering. Their harming you is a cause of their own future suffering. So therefore, they deserve more compassion than you. Ultimately, everybody deserves compassion, blah, blah, blah. But right now, they deserve compassion. They are the victim here. So, the first thing is when people treat you, harm you intentionally, or especially when they betray you. And Lama said, we all know what betrayal is. We've all experienced it. It's happened in one way or another to everyone. When that happens, we have to start with our intention not to fall under the sway of our reactivity or habits. And then we have to cultivate patience and finally compassion, fundamentally by widening our perspective. By not treating this incident as an isolated incident, but as a part of a long samsara series of events. The second situation to which we react is even more of a problem, and that is friends. Enemies are a problem, but Lama said we tend to nurse grudges with a certain limited amount of energy because the feeling isn't good, so we tend to dwell on it sporadically but not constantly. But when we have friends and family, those we would say those we love, or loved ones, our cultivation, our indulgence in attachment knows no bounds, knows no limits. And he said, far more practitioners are destroyed by this kind of attachment to friends and family than they are by their hatred for enemies. Because it's tricky. He said, it's obvious to anyone with an ounce of Dharma training that you shouldn't cultivate hatred. We may still do it, but we know it's wrong. But we do want to cultivate love. We know that there is something right, he said, about loving our friends. We know that the attitude, you should not have friends, you should not love your friends, you should not love your family. We know that that's not the answer either. So it makes the situation a little trickier for us to know what to do. The problem with our love for friends and family and our craving for stuff we like. Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Thaye says wealth and stuff we like, is that it's founded on, again, like our enmity toward enemies, a lack of context. It's founded on the false imputation of permanence and therefore reality. How so? Anything and everything you love or like is an illusion, is no more real than a dream, and therefore is unreal. Because if you like it, if you love them, that is based upon perceived attributes. All perceived attributes are illusory, according to the Buddha. Therefore, whatever you love and whatever you like is an illusion. It has no more reality than stuff in a dream. To look at it in a practical, common sense way, Lama said, think about the changes in our relationships. you think of somebody as my friend, but tomorrow they could be your worst enemy. These things can, what does it, change on a dime? And someone you think of today as my enemy, you could feel as much love for them tomorrow as you do your own children or parents, your own siblings. There is no more reality in the attributes we ascribe to objects of attachment, whether beings or inanimate objects, than there is to the reality of attributes we experience as pleasant in a dream. So the way, whereas the way to cut through anger and hatred is through perspective, greater perspective, producing patience and leading to compassion. The way to cut through attachment is through greater perspective, allowing you to recognize unreality, the unreality of perceived attributes. And when that's too heavy a lift, simply the impermanence of them. And then there's the third object, which is people and things and appearances that do not give rise to either attachment or aversion. And the problem with that, of course, as stated, is that we don't really leave them alone. It's not that in the absence of attachment and aversion, we abstain from mental engagement. We do engage mentally. We engage with apathy. Apathy, from a Buddhist point of view, is not an absence. It is an actual act of mind. Not caring is an act, a negative act. It is not an absence of action. The absence of action would be Buddha nature. Not caring is an act of mental engagement. What's defined as incorrect mental engagement. So therefore, don't act out of apathy. So with regard to beings that you don't know, beings about whom you have no conventional reason to care, do things for them. Establish, don't be apathetic, establish a positive connection. So this would be things like place images of the three jewels where they will see it. Recite the names of Buddhas in their hearing, as well as dozens of other profound mantras. Burn incense containing samaya substances where they will smell it. And if you can, put edible samaya substances in their food or their water. And try to make it possible for them to engage in some good action, such as physical prostrations or circumambulation. Try to inspire in them some level of faith and devotion. So in short, since apathy is not an absence of action, but an actual negative action. It's actually a negative action. It's not neutral. We have to counteract that, just as we counteract hatred with compassion and fixation with the recognition of unreality, we have to counteract apathy with positive engagement, doing something for those for whom we would otherwise feel apathy.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Oh, Gigi, then how to tell us like a drop song, then Suruk telling us of Trotting with some market. Chazan Trotting, Mazo, Chazogolo to Zuka, country the Taki, then it Trotting, titular Surungas or Trotting second, they are sorry.
So we've reached a stopping place with the end of the morning. So this afternoon, Lama said I'd like to use 4 questions and answers.